people take shipping containers for granted. You regularly see them on trucks, rail cars, and on ships. You occasionally see them stacked up at seaports and container depots. But it's easy to forget that almost every consumer product we use was probably moved via shipping containers. Perhaps the biggest enabler of globalization has not been a free trade agreement, but the simple invention called the shipping container. However, the prolonged impact of the pandemic and the Suez Canal blockade are disrupting global supply chains like never before. The shipping container that has been the building block of global trade growth is turning into the latest source of frustration for importers and exporters around the world. The steel boxes are harder than ever to find as surging demand to restock inventories and a series of shipping disruptions has left many thousands of containers stranded at sea on ships. Many more are stacked up at inland freight hubs in the US, Europe, and Asia as companies struggle to cope with the cargo flows. The container dislocation has contributed to skyrocketing freight costs and complicated efforts to meet resurgent consumer demand. Hello everyone, I'm Reggie John and this is Logistic Tech Dialogues presented by Kale Logistics Solutions. This is our weekly dialogue on innovations and technologies that make logistics move faster and deliver better. Logistic Tech Dialogues is brought to you in partnership with Kale Logistics Solutions, a trusted global logistic IT solutions provider for several Fortune 500 companies worldwide. My guest today is Roeloffs, founder and Chief Executive Officer of Container xChange. In November 2015, when Roeloffs and Jonas Schlingmeyer launched their startup Container xChange in Hamburg in Germany, they aimed to tackle the problem of repositioning empty containers by digitizing the process and allowing for carriers and logistic companies to interchange their empty boxes with the aim of cutting operating cost. It is said that every third container being moved is empty. According to estimates, the cost of repositioning empty containers amounts to about $20 billion per year industry-wide, impacting container carriers, leasing companies, and other logistic companies. Today, Container xChange is the leading digital marketplace platform for 800 plus shipping companies to lease, rent, sell, and transport empty containers around the world more easily and efficiently. Christian joins me to discuss the growth of Container xChange since its founding and what value the platform provides to shipping companies in the current crisis of container shortages. Christian, welcome to Logistic Tech Dialogues. Thanks for finding time to talk to us.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start with looking at current circumstances and the entire global freight industry, particularly the sea freight industry, also specifically on the current container shipping market, supply-demand mismatch, and rapidly increasing freight rate. What are some of your observations on the current container shipping market, and when do you see some sort of stability coming into the market?
I wish I had a crystal ball. I would make good use of it and good profits of that in these times. I think it's very difficult to predict the future. But what we've seen today really started, of course, with the outbreak of COVID and the resulting sort of disruptions in the especially container logistics supply chain. What we saw was that on top of the existing sort of structural imbalance of container flows that have already existed and that will always exist in the market because of structural imbalances in import-export flows, you suddenly had very disruptive factors. You had suddenly lack of truck drivers because of lockdowns. You had lockdowns of ports, and not everywhere at the same time, but in very sort of how do you say inconsistent time intervals between regions and countries globally. You have extensions and prolongations of container turnaround times, of container handling times, etc., which just increased the need for available container equipment and slot capacity for container transports. And because that capacity wasn't there or couldn't be ramped up that quickly, we just have the effect that you see today: massive spikes in freight rates, non-availability of containers, essentially the container shipping companies being in a very, very strong position of power to dictate terms, introduce new charges on whatever they want, and really taking a big profitability boost out of this situation. We see now that companies try to deal with this situation by increasing container equipment inventory and also ordering new vessels in order to introduce them into the existing trade lanes. But that's, of course, a process that takes time. Capacity cannot be introduced so quickly. And so we do expect the situation to calm down sometime early to mid next year. But very likely not before that, especially now with also peak season coming, etc., etc.
Christian, I think it all started with the COVID pandemic early last year, February, March. But since then, it's been one reason, one cause after another. When you look at the current situation, also a few months back, we had the Suez Canal blockage. Can you pinpoint reasons beyond the COVID, or are we like forced to look at all this back to COVID as a reason for the current crisis?
No, I think you're right. It's not all just COVID, but the problem is that COVID almost like exacerbates every little disruption in the supply chain that happens. And we've always had disruptions in the supply chain. It's nothing new, and every industry participant knows that we have to do a lot of firefighting constantly because there's always unforeseen issues and disruptions. But having COVID around as a sort of an underlying continuous disruption just makes all these smaller disruptions the more critical and the more difficult to deal with. And that can be factors like Suez Canal, but it's also topics like Brexit and sudden sort of changes in customs clearance processes within Europe that just extend sort of container turnaround times. It's also factors like strikes in the ports and terminals in the US. That just sort of suddenly again increase berthing times, increase handling times of container vessels in the major North American ports, and all these congestions then sort of are exacerbated and increased by the underlying factor of COVID, which in the end then for us just looks like a perfect storm.
Do you think the shipping liners are actually taking certain advantage? Because when we look at the financial numbers of, I looked at the DP World yesterday, the growth rates are phenomenal, and it's largely because of the greater yield that they have in the last 6 months. But you get a sense that the shipping industry is also taking full advantage of the current crisis.
If by shipping industry you mean the main liners,
the liners, yeah,
and then yes, absolutely. I think we can't really blame them, right? Because over the last 12, 13, 14 years, especially the shipping liner industry has suffered a lot. A lot of this suffering has been inflicted by themselves, but just sort of ordering too much capacity and then driving down prices by oversupply. Now that they have the chance to recoup some of those losses and make some profit, I think we can't really blame them.
Let me come to some of the things that I've also been reading about, the changes in the consumer habits, and during that actually happened during the pandemic. People are like locked up in homes, working from home, and it had an impact on the shipping and logistic industry. And going through the DP World press release yesterday on the numbers, something that the DP World chairman actually makes a special reference to the changing habits of the global consumers. There is a certain amount of resettling of global supply chains to closer to where the consuming market is. What are some of the things that you are noticing as important trends which are actually affecting container traffic or container shipping industry in the world?
So I think there's three trends or three sometimes conflicting worries or shifts. Before actually COVID happened, there was a lot of talk about nearshoring, the impact of 3D printing. Will we actually need goods from China, or will sort of new technology make transport and logistics obsolete and sort of drive down transport volume? I think that was number one. We don't really see that, but we do see quite conversely, we do see sort of a split up of supply chains a little bit, so that not everything is produced in China anymore, but there's a lot more sort of intra-Asia supply chain connections that are being implemented, and that actually drive up transportation and logistics needs. That hasn't really shown. Then we've seen COVID and its impact on consumer spending behavior. Suddenly, consumers couldn't go out to the cinema anymore, couldn't go out traveling, couldn't spend money on experiences, and they started to spend money on goods. And most of these goods came from Asia, not just China anymore, but all over Asia, and had to be transported somehow. And that just drove up the need for logistics services, be it in air freight or of course via the container in sea freight. If you look at the numbers though, this hasn't been a major shift. So I think transport growth, so to speak, or demand for transport growth has been up somewhere between 4 and 6% year over year, which is a significant increase, but it's not majorly disruptive, so to speak. Now the third point is, how will that then of course change going forward? Will we go back to spending more money on experiences and less on goods? What will happen to global supply chains? That's going to be a question for the future, and unfortunately I don't have that crystal ball, but I do think that there will be a slight decrease in that demand for transport services, just because we go back to previous consumer spending patterns.
Now, Christian, the quarter four of each year is really important. A lot of the shipping companies or logistic companies make up for what they've lost in the first 3 quarters in the last quarter, because that's the peak season. And we are actually approaching Q4, and going through the news on the logistic industry, it's not really looking nice because exporters would probably will default on their export commitment. They would not have access to capacity, delays and congestions at port, exorbitant freight rate. What would be happening on the Q4? Are you expecting to have a kind of major disruption leading to chaos in the shipping industry?
Part yes and part no. So definitely I expect the current situation to become even worse over the next 2 to 3 months into peak season, because suddenly you really have that spike in demand, and the shipping industry, or the container industry, so to speak, hasn't really figured out the supply problem yet, the supply side yet. So you really still have those disruptions. You have lack of equipment, you have lack of shipping capacity, slot capacity, etc. And that spike in demand will just create a big problem there. At the same time, there's also it's also not sure how COVID and related sort of disruptions will play out over the coming months. Maybe rising vaccination rates will actually lead to an easing up of those disruptions. We have less port closures, less worry to find truckers or how do you say that, people to man the ships, etc. Maybe we also see an easing up on that side, which would then ease up the situation. But the way it looks now, with the efficacy of vaccines against various variants of the virus, this doesn't really look very, very likely. So all in all, we do expect some increase in disruptions, especially over the next couple of months.
Now let's talk about the container exchange. When you went to the market with your SaaS product, did the ocean freight industry take you seriously? That was in 2015, I believe.
Yeah, and no, we were not taken seriously at all. Actually, when we started out, we didn't really start out with a SaaS product. We started out with a pure marketplace, a visibility product that would allow container owners see or find counterparts with available equipment to be able to then deal with them or strike a deal with them and approach them for containers. So that marketplace product was the start. I think nobody really took us seriously. I think after about three years or so of attending trade shows, we had the first customers approach us proactively saying, hey guys, I've seen you now for 2 or 3 years, so there seems to be something about this. Please, can you tell me what you're actually doing? So I think the industry is quite slow in adapting to innovation and adapting to change. But by now, and also after introducing a couple of additional features to that very, very simplistic marketplace model, more and more customers trust us and use our product.
Who was your first customer?
The first paying customer was a container trader from Germany, actually, who started using that against some payment. Before that, of course, we because we spun off from the Boston Consulting Group, we had a couple of beta clients, especially large shipping lines who we worked with from our consulting days, and who just sort of started testing and trialing the product.
How is technology changing the container shipping industry? Because technology seems to be the savior for a lot of the problems that we face in the transport and logistic industry.
Yeah, true. It's very interesting, actually, right? If you think about the container, it's so simple. It's just a steel box, but it has absolutely revolutionized trade, right? It has driven down freight costs to a fraction of what it was before. It has massively simplified logistical value chains. It has essentially enabled globalization and driven global welfare, lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. So the container itself, that steel box, is a significant technological leap, maybe like the steam engine or the invention of electricity or something like that. So it's really, really been a massive, massive shift. What hasn't been very innovative is all the related processes around the container, right? How we move the container from A to B, how we communicate with our partners, be it the depots, the terminals, the shipping lines, the customs clearance agents, the truckers, everybody around the container who provides processes. The communication is just manual, and innovation there really means email, WhatsApp, WeChat, Kakao Talk, whatever region of the world you're in. So their innovation has really been extremely poor, and that leads to the entire industry constantly firefighting and solving problems, unexpected problems in very manual and inefficient ways. That's sort of what technology is. And then right now, over the past, I think 5 to 10 years, you really see an emergence of innovation in that industry, but mostly focused on the commercial front end, right? You see the Fortos, you see the Flexports, you see the Instafreights, you see Zeneta, so freight rate benchmarking, etc., Cargo One on the air freight side. You see a lot of that innovation happening to improve the interface between the shipper and the freight forwarder, typically, or the shipping line. So there's been a lot of focus. Again, where there hasn't been a lot of focus is an area where we now play in, and that's that underlying infrastructure of global trade and global container logistics. How is the container actually moved? How do companies communicate with each other? And that fabric hasn't really seen a lot of innovation, and that's something which we now tackle and want to make more efficient, and ideally as efficient as the container itself.
Need for cost savings, visibility, and transparency. These are 3 core elements driving digital transformation in the logistic industry right now. Are these 3 things that are core to what you people do at a container xChange?
Yes. Yeah, I think you can say so. I think underlying our product really are a couple of key factors. One is actually visibility and transparency, like you mentioned. Another one is trust. So you need to trust your partners in your supply chain, and our product makes it easier to find new partners and trust them more quickly, so to speak. And then really the last one is efficiency and automation. So you want to make your processes, you want to turn your processes from manual issue resolution and fixing, calling your partners, WhatsApping your partners, emailing your partners. You want to turn these processes into sort of an automated, repeatable engine, ideally using API connections between systems to streamline operations. And I think for us, these are the three core factors: visibility, trust, and automation. And then ultimately, why do you do that? You want to save costs, you want to be faster, you want to increase your revenues because you can do more business with the same resources in order to gain a competitive advantage.
Christian, what is your business model?
We're essentially a SaaS-enabled marketplace, if you want to say so. So our customers, typically freight forwarders, shipping lines, and container owners, purchase a subscription for access to our marketplace. It's almost like a SaaS subscription, software as a service subscription that you pay per month. Then these customers can make use of all the visibility on the marketplace, find available containers for purchase, but also for lease, and then do these transactions on the marketplace for free. So there's no additional transaction cost. And then they typically add value-added services onto their transaction, be it purchasing an insurance, purchasing premium tracking services, purchasing surveying services of the container to make sure that the container is actually in the right condition when they want to provide it to their customer. And then we really manage the entire transaction workflow, from pickup of the container, communication with the depots, return of the container, billing and invoicing, repair claims management. So the entire process then handled through xChange.
And what is the technology architecture that you have in, and is that built in-house?
Yes, correct. The majority of our technology is built in-house. We I think it would go into too much detail if I talk about our tech stack, but most of this is built in-house. And then of course we interface with some third-party integrations, be it for the handling of payments, be it for some tracking services, be it for some insurance and surveying services. We then essentially plug into third-party systems, or of course our client systems via EDI, API, ODBC, or other technologies.
What is the size of the market you are addressing? I believe the cost of repositioning of the empty container is not really small, right?
Yes, so that was actually our original sort of value proposition also to the market, that we say we are going to save money on empty repositioning of the container because we want to make the usage of the container more efficient. And that market alone is about $20 billion in spend. So basically just moving around empty containers. However, by now, we really have expanded that addressable market, not only by allowing container purchases and sales on xChange and attaching all these value-added services, but we've really become a fully integrated neutral container leasing platform and trading platform, if you want to say so. In total, we estimate this market for container logistics services to be about 180 to 200 billion US dollars annually.
And how does your online cloud platform work on a real-time basis? Is the data that you find is how real is the real time?
How real is real time? That always depends on the customers ultimately. So of course we also struggle with inaccuracy of data at some points, especially when we pull it straight from our customer systems via integrations. If their data is a little bit outdated, then ultimately our data is also a little bit outdated. But we are getting better and better at cleaning this data as well, and using past data points and machine learning approaches to clean this data and say, okay, if our customer actually tells us A, this means ultimately that we actually have B, sort of as a translation. That really improves data quality. And then also we interface with more and more partners across the value chain to correlate between data points and actually find out what is true or fair and true. And further improve data quality.
And the rates or the price is actually completely determined or decided by the market.
Correct. Yes, we are 100% neutral. We never take a position in any trade, be it a leasing or a trading trade. It's just purely the customers that decide how much do they want to charge for a container, how much do they charge for the rental, how much do they want to pay for repairs. So they also discuss the repair claims online. So all of that is purely in the hands of the customers.
And you have both the renting, leasing, as well as people can actually buy also the old containers as well as the new containers. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. We started out purely with a leasing marketplace, with that original value proposition in mind, that there is a lot of unused container equipment capacity that's sitting empty at the depots, while at the same time somebody else at the same location urgently needs containers and could just use those on a short-term one-trip basis. That was the original value proposition. That was the leasing marketplace. And since then, the leasing marketplace has grown to really become a distribution channel of container leasing companies, container traders, and other container owners. And then what happened was, and that's actually where most of the innovation also on xChange comes from, our clients approached us and said, I have these containers there, I cannot find somebody to lease them out, or I actually want to get rid of that equipment capacity because I don't want it back. I don't need it anymore. My business model has changed. Can I just flag these units for resale and also offer them for trading? And we said, yeah, sure. Let's see whether that works. We built an MVP, a minimum viable product around it, and tested this marketplace. And there was demand, so we really built a second product around it.
These are both old as well as new containers.
Correct. Yeah. Originally, it was only secondhand containers, but then more and more customers basically said, hey, I also have new build containers in Shanghai or in Ningbo or Qingdao. Can I also put these on the platform and flag them for sale? And in the end, a box is a box. Since 60 years, that has been the concept. And whether you want to sell it new or used, doesn't matter.
So you provide the platform only for those owners of the containers to have them listed on your platform. It's not that you take the ownership of the inventory.
Correct. Yeah, we never take ownership of inventory. We are never taking a position in any trade. Quite the opposite of how some other container trading platforms or marketplaces work, where the operator of the marketplace, be it a box port or a box hub, actually takes ownership of the container. We never do that. It's purely a B2B, a peer-to-peer transaction.
One more question related to this. What is a trend that you see in terms of the rate, the renting leasing rate as against people buying the new or old containers? Is the trend very similar?
Yeah, so in the past, we used to have daily rental fees for, let's say, a 20 or 40 foot, 20-foot container of, I don't know, between 80 cents a day and $1.50 a day, somewhere around that. And now we really see rental rates of $2.50 to $5 per day. So really massively increasing, sometimes 3-4 times the original price. And that's the same that we see on the container trading market.
Christian, tell us about your customer mix on your platform. I believe it is, I can clearly see there are 3 sets of people. One is a container leasing companies, any of the ocean liners, and third one is the people who are actually selling old or the new creators or who have the old or new containers. And are other shippers really buying directly from you as well, or from the platform?
A very good question, and the answer is no. We don't have the shippers on the platform, but the fourth very important customer group is freight forwarders and NVOCCs, who then act on behalf of their customers, the shippers, to arrange container equipment, to arrange capacity for their shipments. And those are actually volume-wise. By now, this is actually the biggest customer group on xChange.
No, but then there's always a confusion as to when you call shipper, even a freight forwarder is a shipper because he represents a shipper. So you have something called SOCs, shipper on containers. So you don't have a shipper. When I say shipper, it could be a Mercedes-Benz or a manufacturer, for example. So you don't have them on your platform. They don't business with you.
Correct. And we also try to stay neutral or a little bit distinct from them because again, we don't want to compete with our customer's customer. The customer, the typical leasing customer by now on xChange is either the ocean shipping line, like a deep sea carrier, or it's an NVOCC or freight forwarder. And very, very rarely we get approached by the actual shippers, so Mercedes-Benz or an Adidas or Nike, to actually rent containers. That happens very, very rarely, and we try to stay away from that.
Tell us about the coverage. How many ports and what regions do you have dominance, or are they equally spread across the world?
When we originally started, we immediately started with about 2,500 locations globally. Again, that was driven by the fact that we were spun off from a management consulting firm, and our clients were typically the big ocean carriers. And to cater to them, we had to say we have global coverage. But the thing is, on a marketplace, you really need to build regional or local liquidity in order to make the marketplace attractive for other partners who then join and do transactions. So what we've, since starting xChange, what we've really focused on were 3 main liquidity hotspots or liquidity areas. And this is intra-Europe, so everything in the Baltic Sea, the North Sea, the Mediterranean Sea. there's quite a bit of traffic and quite some liquidity. The second hotspot is Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia. So everything essentially around the Indian Ocean. And then the third liquidity hotspot is really everything in and out of China, both east and westbound. China, Europe, Europe, China, and then of course the Trans-Pacific East-West trades.
Tell us about the monthly transaction and what is the growth rate that you record month over month?
We generally don't talk about transaction volumes, so to speak, but on average, we have a growth rate on the transaction volumes at the moment between 10 and 20% month on month. What we really benefit from are the network effects on xChange. So the more customers we add, and we add about, again, also between 8 and 12% on month in terms of customer numbers and customer volumes, that really drives transaction volumes, because every additional member or participant on the marketplace, on the network, significantly increases the value and the transaction volume on the marketplace overall.
Right now, what is the total number of customers you have on the platform?
About 700.
Christian, based on your historical data, what is the potential annual saving for one of your customers if it's a shipping liner? What would be the savings for a customer? A few hundred millions?
I wouldn't go that far. A couple of hundred millions, at least US dollars. Rupees, it might be different, but in US dollars, that's a very, very high estimate. For a mid-sized container liner, we typically see that one transaction on xChange saves repositioning costs. So if we're now only thinking about repositioning costs again, of between $300 and $500 per box, right? So, and that's just one move. Let's say on average $400. If I then do, I don't know, 10,000 containers on xChange, that gives me a saving of, I don't know, $4 million that I just purely generate from that. What you then have to add to that, of course, is the additional revenue generation opportunities from leasing in equipment on xChange. And that really depends, of course, on the freight rates, where at the moment, if the freight rates are so high, and I've seen rates of $18,000, $20,000 on some of the east-west trades, if I can get a container in that location at a reasonable price, let's say $1,000 for a pickup charge, immediately my revenue generation opportunity jumps significantly. But that's very, very difficult to say on an overall sort of global level per customer.
On the trade imbalance, because that's where you have a problem on the cargo side, there are certain trade lanes which have got a very huge imbalance, and that actually affect also the optimization of the movement of the empty containers. Even though you may have the best of the SaaS platform to look at that. So how do you actually mitigate those risks?
You can't really address them with the market rates, to be honest, because you always have, if we take the example of China and Germany, you always have China exporting more goods into Germany than the other way around. So you always have to move empty equipment back. The only thing that you can then sort of look at and address is what other commodity groups or what other cargo types can I actually put into a container in order to use that empty capacity on the backhaul. And sometimes the question is not how do we make a profit, but how do we reduce the cost. And so if I look at what our customers load into the containers on the backhaul, for example, from Europe back to China, there's really everything in there, from plastic scrap through whole entire logs. So they actually drive the container into the forest and pull out the logs and ship them to China for paper purposes, for example. In the end, I doubt that we'll ever be able to generate enough containerizable cargo, so to speak, on the backhaul to really fill all of that equipment. So you always need to move containers back empty. And then, of course, that's where other innovations come into play, like foldable containers that can be a very interesting solution on some of the very imbalanced trades where you just don't have a choice but moving containers back empty.
Okay, Christian, on to the company. How many people, how many location, your current investment, acquisition, you did a recent acquisition, and what are your future plans to scale your business?
So right now we're about 150, 160 people, most of them based in Hamburg, Germany. those are not all Germans. So it's a very international young team, but most of them are based in Hamburg. And then we have a small customer ops office in Indonesia. Currently 6 people who essentially support our customers in the Asian time zones. You're right. We just recently acquired tankcontainerfinder.com to essentially enlarge our scope also into that tank container market. Was a great opportunity for us, and initial results of the integration of that marketplace into xChange are very, very promising, and I think we'll be able to generate a lot of value, not only for our existing customers to now also deal in tank containers, but also in attracting and helping out an entirely new segment of the market. Going forward, the idea is, or for xChange to scale is really twofold. We want to and we need to constantly improve our product, make transactions even easier, reduce friction in the transportation and value chain, attach new products and features onto xChange, onto our SaaS platform. That doesn't necessarily always have to be sort of provided by us, but it can really be also third-party integrations that plug into xChange and then provide their features or their products to our customers. Examples for that could be a truck booking on xChange, or a premium tracking service provided by outside partners, etc., etc. And then the other vector of growth is really ramping up the customer acquisition, so bringing on new members onto the marketplace. As I said, right now we grow the number of customers between 8 and 12% month on month, and we just want to continue with that pace and invest heavily into sales and marketing ultimately to bring on new customers and further increase liquidity on the marketplace.
Are you adequately funded? Are you looking for the next round of funding?
We are VC funded since we spun out of BCG. BCG is still a minority shareholder, adding a little bit of neutrality also to the cap table. But right now we are very well funded. We're very happy with our existing cap table and investor side. So we're not looking for any new funds anytime soon.
Christian, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, thanks a lot for having me. It was a pleasure, and I will do this anytime again.
That was Christian Roeloffs, founder and CEO of Container xChange. I hope you enjoyed watching this interview. Give us a like and share it among your social and professional networks. Also, if you're not a subscriber of our YouTube channel, please do subscribe now and click the bell icon so that you do not miss any of our new videos. Join me next Thursday for a fresh and new episode of Logistic Tech Dialogues presented by Kale Logistics Solutions. Until next Thursday, take good care of yourself and be safe. Thanks for watching.